This video isn't going to show you how to serve.
But what it is going to do is take your serve from good to great.
So what we're going to do is give you 3 progressive tips to make your serve even better.
So let's get into it.
So tip number 1, and this is a bit more of a basic tip because it's looking at setup, but this is going to be so important for getting your serve to dip sooner. So if we get Dean to take his setup position here. Now, this is all about looking at the rules to begin with. Now, we're using these older rules where that bottom rib is the highest point we can contact the shuttle, and Dean's already in a fantastic position here. He's pushing that height of that bottom rib. What we often see is this whole setup much lower. Now, what this is going to cause is that shuttle's flight to be much higher over the net, whereas if Dean gets himself back up into his good position, it's a much flatter flight for that shuttle. It's going to dip sooner over the net and make it much harder for your opponent.
And Dave, an area that we also see that maybe people get a little bit wrong is the angle of the racket almost feeling like it's almost too down and the hand feeling really high. Why is it we don't want this position?
Well, there are 2 reasons I don't like this. And Dean, if you can set up here. 1, to get this racket head then level with your bottom rib, this hand has to come so high. And if you push from this position, it's really quite awkward. Number 2, as you demoed there, Dean, as you follow through, that racket face is always following up, which means if you slightly mistime this serve, that face is causing that serve to go even higher. Whereas if we set up to this flat position again, as Dean follows through, that face is now staying flatter for a lot longer, which is going to keep that serve flatter and dipping sooner. And tip number 3 is actually looking at this line. Now, what we sometimes see, Dean, if you can set up, is people standing way too far back from this line. And what this is going to cause, it's going to cause that shuttle to be in the air for a bit too long, which is going to give your opponent more time to see the shuttle, react, and play a better return of serve. So what we want is we want you pushing right up to that line. Obviously, you can't stand on the line, but as close as you can get. You're going to be able to hit this serve a lot softer now, and it's going to make it much harder for your opponent.
If you're enjoying this video, please like, subscribe, and share. And Dave, I know the next thing you're wanting to talk about is where actually people are landing the shuttle on the other side of the court. What you're seeing happening? It
seems quite a simple one, but it's been so common when we've been coaching on why people maybe aren't getting this really tight serve, and that's because when we've actually watched their serve and seen where it's landing about a foot, maybe a foot and a half past the line. Now, the issue with this is if that serve's coming faster over that net, it's going to hold its flight for a little longer. And what we're wanting is this serve to dip as soon as it gets over the tape. So yes, if you're someone where they're returning from further back, you don't need to get this serve like perfectly on the line, but we want to really be sort of dicing with this front line to make sure it's dipping as soon as possible. So what I'd really encourage you to do is when you're going to practice your serve, see where it's landing and really try and get used to how hard you have to hit it to get it just landing on that line. And a nice little more advanced tip, if you're playing someone where they really want to kind of stand right on that line, look like they're really trying to add pressure, actually serving a tiny bit short can be really useful as well. Often those people are so eager to return serve, they want to be so aggressive, they're not actually going to leave the shuttle and they'll just go for it, but you're going to get that serve dipping sooner and making it so much harder for them.
And it brings in the point you mentioned earlier, Dave, is about this reaction time. If someone is standing so close to the line, again, that shuttle is not in the air very long. No. They have a very, very quick decision whether they're going to hit it or leave it. And actually, sometimes it's actually easy for them to hit it rather than having the misjudgment just in case it goes in.
Precisely.
So David, talk us through a couple of causes as to why this serve might be going a little bit too far.
I think 2 big ones for me is 1 being a bit too fast with the racket. So when we're going up to serve, we see sometimes these really short backswings and punching through, and you just lose control with that. When for our serve, we want smooth. Smooth's the word we like to use. So we're coming back and through in this nice, smooth, soft action. It's going to get that shuttle coming out nice and soft. The second one actually is regarding the grip. And a lot of people sometimes struggle with their serve and they get nervous on the serve and they end up tensing, getting too tight in that grip. We want that loose grip. It's going to help that shuttle come out softly and start dipping so we get that smooth action as well.
It's important to think about that loose grip, maintaining the whole way through the shot. It's not something we're looking to squeeze as we main contact because we're not looking for power. It's very smooth and light the whole way through the serve.
And it just means when you go to use that flick, you can then use that squeeze for the flick and you have a good flick serve as well.
So David, tip number 3 in a slightly more advanced area, what is it we're looking at here?
Well, I mean, if we look at traditionally how we'd want you to hit your serve, and that's a nice back and through action, keeping that face square. But if we start looking at some of the better players, and I'm really thinking of Kevin Sukmojo here, the Indonesian player who's so good at serving, they add a little bit of cut. Now by this, we're not talking about the spin serve that they do. Yeah. What we're looking at contact, we're just cutting slightly down on that shuttle. What I do this on my serve, I feel it dips a little sooner, okay? I feel like when I slightly point the shuttle, and as I come down, I'm getting this almost like curving action on that shuttle. It is legal because we're contacting the cork. That's the important thing. We're not contacting the feathers. That's the thing that changes whether it's legal or not. But what this can do is just get a tiny bit more dip, making it harder for your opponent.
So Dave, just talk us through a couple of technical points for this slightly chopped serve.
Well, I'll talk it as if I'm a right-hander. If you're a left-hander, you just got to flip it slightly. Grip-wise, I change my grip a bit. I go for a bevel grip because I'm slightly pulling the racket from left to right, and I feel I can get a bit more pressure through the thumb there instead of the normal thumb grip. When I'm setting up, I like to angle the shuttle slightly towards my left hip. So as I cut across, the cut's going with the direction the shuttle's pointing. And then I'm feeling like I'm coming slightly left to right. And what that does is get that curve. And it's the opposite of the spin serve. The spin serve, people point the shuttle the other way, so don't get confused with that one. And as we go to hit, we're just soft hands again, and we're getting it to cut and dip over the net.
So sometimes the backhand low serve for doubles can be seen as quite a boring area to practice, but it's by far the most important, as every rally starts with a serve.
But the main thing with the backhand serve is making sure you have a nice, simple technique that dips early over the net, landing softly at the front line. And you can start adding more advanced techniques as your confidence grows and if it's required.